Thanks, Michelle. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for making time for our Gale ISFM Fellowship Info session. And my name is Veronica Finn Brewery. I'm the president of ISFM, and we are very excited to have Chris Halton here today. He is responsible for Gale Fellowship, Gale International Fellowships. And we are very, very pleased to have him. And thank you, Chris, for thinking of ISFM, for inviting us to be a part of this amazing fellowship program. I can say amazing because, not because I'm trying to just throw words around, but because I've had an opportunity, which I'll update you later, to have a session with the Gale database. And so it's been stunning. I'm so excited to delve into this and find out all the gold mines you have hidden in Gale that I've never heard about. And so, yeah, I'm absolutely excited for our ISFM members, especially those early career PhD postdocs and other graduate students that are going to apply for this program. I know it's going to be competitive. And so I'm so excited that some of you are showing up, and please spread the word and invite more of your friends to be a part of it. Without taking too much more time, we're going to be a small group. And so we're going to have an intimate conversation with Chris. I will pass it on to Chris to take between 45 minutes to 1 hour, depending on how much content he can deliver within that period, so we can understand and get the nitty-gritty and leave getting more excited about being a part of ISFM Gale Fellowship. So thanks, Chris. And thank you, Michelle, for organizing this as well.
I would echo that one. Thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Veronica. That's a very generous introduction. I appreciate it. Great. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. I can see that somebody's put something in the chat already, but that's totally fine. Oh, there we go. Michelle's saying everything's being recorded. I'll try and keep an eye on that. But bear in mind that in terms of things like questions, there's more than enough time for questions at the end of this. We're not, as we've seen, going to be going for sort of 2 hours here. I don't need to kind of overload you with a lot of information. And really, my goal is just to sort of introduce you to some of the key points about the fellowship, about who Gale is, and that sort of thing, but mostly to be able to answer your questions. Save your questions to the end. You can either unmute and ask me in person or pop them into the chat, and we'll cover them all off, but hopefully I'll be able to cover most of your questions as we're going through. So, as you've already heard, I'm head of academic partnerships here at Gale, which means a few things. I wear a few hats. My job really is to work with the wider academic community, but specifically within the area of digital humanities. Now, I don't know how much you are aware of digital humanities. Some of you might be experts, some of you might not know about it at all. And if this was a training session or something like that, I would be asking for your knowledge levels. But for the moment, it doesn't really matter. I'll come on to DH in a bit, but suffice to say that I work with researchers and instructors around the world to support research from Gale's point of view. So to submit funding bids and to support those sorts of things and support projects as well. As you're going to see, a lot of my world is kind of about data and that sort of thing, but also to support teaching. And I get involved with guest lecturing at various institutions, especially around digital humanities. But another part of what I do is I manage our fellowships program. And our fellowships program sort of joins together with the rest of my job. And our fellowships program, as you're going to see, has been going for well, this is going to be the 5th year where we've been running these fellowships. So I'm just going to start by introducing you to them. First of all, let's get down to the nitty-gritty of what the fellowships are going to involve. So we actually do 2 sets of fellowships. We do have a residential fellowship program that we run with Oxford University here in the UK, who are just sort of quite close to where I am. But the one that we're talking about here are non-residential fellowships. So fellowships where we'll pay you some money to do some research in your home institutions, or from home or whatever. And what we're offering with IASFM are 3 non-residential fellowships, and the awards is $2,500 which is designed to cover about 160 hours of work, so sort of roughly 1 full-time month. Now, as you're going to see, the fellowships run for roughly about a 6-month period. Here we've got, just happens to be, this is how the weeks work out, between July the 4th, 2025 to January the 2nd, 2026. That can be extended a little bit depending on how your projects are going. And you can do the work however you want. You can spread the work out in that 6-month period. Essentially, that 6 months is about when you've got access to all the Gale databases and all the content and all the tools that I'm going to be talking about later. You'll have it between those periods, and you'll have access to people like me and other experts within Gale who can help and support, and you can consider me your unpaid research assistant while you're working in this endeavor. Now, as I said, how you schedule your work is totally up to you. You could decide to do all of your research between 4th of July and the 4th of August and get it all done in that first month. I'm sure you all will. I'm sure you're all that organized. Or it could be that you're working very hard over Christmas and you're doing it all at the last minute, or you're doing a week, a month, whatever it is. We really don't mind. Okay, it is totally up to you. One of the things that we try and make clear with the fellowships is that we don't want to be too prescriptive about it. I'll talk about what we get out of these fellowships and what we're hoping that you will deliver as part of the fellowships in a little bit. But in terms of how you do things, and indeed what you do, that's really up to you. Okay, and you can do it anytime in this period. So $2,500 for that work to support your research as you're researching and working on your project with the Gale archives. There is also an additional $500 stipend that we give as sort of travel stipend to present your work at the IASFM conference next year. Okay, now to let you know what that means. Essentially, every fellowship organization we've worked with, and every year we work with different fellowship organizations. So this year, IASFM will be one of 4 fellowship organizations that I'm working with. Last year, it was, who was I working with? The American Society of Environmental Historians, the European Society of Environmental Historians, and the Society for Historians of American Foreign Relations. Okay, so those are the fellowships that have just finished at the beginning of this year, and we're sort of developing case studies for there. Now, all of those fellows have the opportunity to travel to their conference and to participate in a panel of their for the fellowship. And really what that's about is, a 15 to 20 minute opportunity for you to present your work, the work that you've done as part of the fellowship. And usually we'll send a moderator there, so a Gale moderator will be with you to do a sort of Q&A with you about how you found the fellowship, what you learned, what you might be, how that might have changed your research, what you might be taking on to the future, and that sort of thing. And we're really pleased to be able to do that. I think it's a great exposure, especially for early career researchers and early career fellows. And obviously, it's a great opportunity to meet the rest of your fellowship cohort, to meet people from Gale, and to get your name out there and your research out there. So those are the broad particulars. Okay, that is basically what these fellowships are. And if you want to learn more about what previous fellows might have done, you can learn from fellowship fellows from the organizations like ASEX, which is the American Society for 18th Century Studies. Here are the 5 fellows. These guys were 3 years ago, I think that's right. And that QR code will take you to I'm going to put all the links, by the way, that I put up. There will be at the end of this, and I'll put a slide up, so you don't have to take these notes or capture the QR codes now if you don't want to. If you don't want to fumble with your phone, I'll put the links up so that you've got them at the end. But that QR code will take you to a page that will essentially present some of the work of some of our fellows. And in terms of what we ask our fellows to do, I thought this is quite an interesting one. This is one of the presentations from one of these ASEX fellows. They were working on a particular monograph. I'm not the lettre édifiante et sérieuse, is that right? Though for anyone sort of who is francophone, then I apologize for my for my pronunciation there. And this was their presentation at the ASEX conference 3 years ago. And this is really what we're trying to capture from these fellowships, and what we will be trying to capture from you is essentially your research, what you've been able to do, what you've been able to find, the discoveries you've made, the exploration that you've done within the Gale archives. And I'll talk more about what you're going to have available to you in a second. It doesn't have to be a completely all singing, all dancing thing. We're not looking for a PhD thesis compiled in 6 months. Okay, if this is a snapshot of your research, or if this is a sort of pathway down which you've taken your research, or whatever, something that you're able to write up to talk about your methodology, or that we can write up, I should say, to talk about your methodology and to present your research, maybe with an idea of what you might go on to do, and where you might take this research, or how working with the Gale archives has changed your research. So it doesn't have to be a massive thing. We're not looking for a monograph from you. We're just looking for an idea of your research so that we can share that with other people who might also be interested in doing something similar, or who could learn from how you've done your research. In many ways, and you can see here that there's quite a lot of methodology within here, quite a lot of analysis and things like that. And don't let that scare you. By the end of the fellowship, you're all going to be experts and be able to do exactly what's here on this page. But the methodology that you use is something that other people can learn from. And frankly, that's what we're interested in. Okay, these fellowships are all about getting your research out to a wide audience so that you can get exposure. Obviously, that's a really, really good thing. But so that other people can learn from how you have done your research, and so that we can present that, and hopefully they'll be able to take those learnings into their own research. So that's sort of what the fellowships are, but I don't really like to assume whenever I do sessions like this that anybody knows what Gale is, or indeed what any of the sort of components of what we're talking about are. So very briefly, I want to sort of go back to the beginning and just introduce Gale. I want to talk about what archives are included, so what you can expect if you're successful in your submission, what you can expect to be using as part of the IASFM, got to really get that acronym right, Gale Fellowship. And indeed, I'm going to talk about Digital Humanities a little bit, and specifically a tool that you'll have access to and that we're hoping that you'll use and get some real value out of. And it's a tool that I'm proud to have been looking after for the last kind of 7 years or so, Gale Digital Scholar Lab. So let's begin by just introducing Gale. So Gale have been around for an awfully long time. We've been around since the 1950s. We started in 1954 as a publisher of library materials, okay, reference materials. Essentially, we started off doing things like directories of companies or associations. Then we very quickly got into literature, and very quickly became one of the biggest publishers of literary criticism. So when you go into the library and you've got those big multi-volume sets like encyclopedic works, chances are a lot of those are from Gale. Okay, and in the kind of 80s, we started getting into something that some of you might be familiar with and some of you might not know at all, but we started getting into microfilm. Okay, we bought a microfilm company. So anyone of a certain age, and yes, that is my age, that is used to doing sort of historical research, maybe 20, 30 years ago, will be familiar with microfilm or microfiche. Now, for those of you too young to remember that, think back to movies about newspapers or people doing research in newspapers, maybe in the sort of 60s or 70s or 80s, where somebody's got a big machine and they're sort of twiddling knobs to look at facsimiles of an image that might look like this. And then in 2002, building on sort of our microfilm experience, we started developing this essentially. We started getting to digital archives, okay? Essentially creating large databases of facsimile images of primary source documents. And this is the very first document that we digitized, okay? This is the first document. This is the first page of a newspaper I'm sure you've probably heard of, the Times newspaper, the Times of London, okay? The Times of London rather pretentiously call themselves the world's newspaper of record, okay? They've been around since the 1st of January 1785, and this is the first page of that newspaper. It wasn't called the Times for about 4 years. This is the Daily Universal Register, okay? And in 2002, we took every page of the Times newspaper from 1st of January 1785 all the way up to, well, now it's up to about 2020. In fact, no, it's up to 2024. And we turned it into something that looked a bit like this, okay? A database, a digital archive that you can search through, okay? So this is the Times Digital Archive, the very first one that we did back in 2002. And in 2003, we did what was at the time the world's most ambitious digitization project. This is ECHO. ECHO stands for 18th Century Collections Online. And ECHO, the reason it's so ambitious is what ECHO contains is every significant book written in English in the 18th century, okay? Everything. So it was about 180,000 books, adding up to about 33 million pages. And you'll have access to both of these things and many, many more besides as part of the fellowship. And basically in the subsequent sort of 22, 23 years, what we've been doing is digitizing many, many collections or individual titles like the Times, and creating lots and lots of digital archives. We're now up to, if you total up all of the Gale digital archives, it adds up to something like 250 million pages, okay, of often hard to access, sometimes impossible to access, often unique, digitized primary source materials, okay? Gale is the largest commercial provider of this kind of materials in the world, okay? And most of your universities, wherever you're from, are likely to have at least one Gale archive, and many of them probably many, many more. So that's who Gale is, and that's what these digital archives are. I noticed a question or something in there. Oh, the Times Digital Archive. There we go. Thanks, Veronica. That's nice of you to say. Okay. So I talked a little bit about digital humanities and why. How did somebody like Gale, who create these sort of collections of digitized materials, how did they get into digital humanities? Well, I suppose the first thing for me to do is to explain briefly what digital humanities is, okay? And as I said, you don't need to be an expert, and you certainly don't need to be an expert to apply for this fellowship, okay? I have had fellows who were experts, and I have fellows who had literally never heard the phrase digital humanities, okay? So don't think that you need to know anything about digital humanities. It's my job to teach you, okay? But what digital humanities is very broadly is the intersection of humanities practice on one hand, so humanities scholarship, and on the other hand, computer science. So it is about using algorithms and techniques and methodologies and tools developed in computer science to analyze humanities data and to hopefully make new discoveries. Okay, it's absolutely fantastic, and it's been around since the 1940s for what it's worth, but it's only become really popular, I would say, in the last 20 years with the advent of, first of all, mass digitization from people like Gale, and on the other hand, the vast increase in computing power, so that we're all in our phones, we've all got more computing power, significantly more computing power than, was used to send man to the moon. Okay, so with those two things, you're able to do some really amazing things. And digital humanities covers a lot of different areas, like, audiology and videography. You can do virtual reality or augmented reality or extended reality. Now, I'm here to tell you we don't do any of that stuff. It's very, very cool, but we don't do any of it. What we do is we support the largest part of digital humanities, and that is text mining. Okay, so basically working with things that can be expressed as text. Now, whether that's a document that was originally a print document or a handwritten document or a document that has been born digital, like maybe you're interested in working with, Twitter or Blue Sky, whatever, or you're mining Wikipedia. It doesn't matter. As long as you can express it as text, you can do what we call text mining with it. Okay, and I thought I would very briefly show you, very briefly, a basic text mining methodology. So you've got a sense of what it is, what, as you're going to see, Gale Digital Scholar Lab does, and where Gale sort of fits in. So with Gale, it kind of starts with this. It starts with the primary source. Obviously this is what we do, okay? And this is a radio talk on family planning from the 1930s. And you can download this. I did download this from within the Gale archives, okay? Now, before we move any further, what I need to kind of get across to you is what Gale's value is to you, an academic researcher, okay? Because on the one hand, our value to you is one of access. Take the Times newspaper. If you wanted to access that first page of the Times newspaper, now you would have to get on a, I'm presuming most of you aren't in the UK, but if you are, doesn't matter. You would have to get on a plane or a boat or a train, and you would have to come to the UK, and you would have to go to the Times archive to try and get access to it. Now, that's pretty difficult, okay? First of all, they've just moved physical location, so you'd have to go and find their new archive location. Also, they don't just give access to like what is really, really fragile newspapers to everybody. So sometimes it can be quite difficult to get it. And even if you did get access, you'd have to flick through it to find what you were interested in, okay? I'm sure most of us have done research in a physical archive, and it's a time-consuming process. And what these digital archives do, obviously, is they give you the ability to access material from libraries all around the world. I mean, Gale's archive partners, we partner with about 300 different libraries and archives, most of the world leading ones. So whether that's the British Library or the US National Archives or the White House or Buckingham Palace or the Shanghai Public Library, we partner with them to digitize their collections, okay? So you can access all of that, again, through your phone or through your computer, if you want to. So access is a huge thing, saving you loads of time, loads of money just going to the physical archive. But I would argue that our value to you is twofold, and the bigger value is one of discovery. Okay, because like I said, when these digital archives came in from us and from other people kind of in the late 90s, early 2000s, the value of them was that instead of having, it being a collection of PDFs, and you still, let's say I was interested in looking at Rwanda, right? So I go to the Times and I'm like, right, okay, I want to find references to Rwanda. And I'm literally turning pages, flicking through until I find something that mentions a phrase or a word that is related to my topic. And then I might copy that page and read it more closely later. In the early 2000s, suddenly these digital archives came in and you didn't need to do that anymore. Now, and I'm sure most of you are aware of this from using archives, either from Gale or from other places. Now, using these digital archives, you can search for the word Rwanda, and it will take you not just to the right issue of the newspaper, it will take you to the right page of the newspaper, and it will take you to the right part of that page, and it will highlight that word in green. Okay, so instantly you are supercharging your research. You are saving potentially hundreds of hours of, you know, just flicking through pages to find what you want. And you're helping to make discoveries as well. And one of the things that you need to know about how we and other publishers make these archives and this data full text searchable is an acronym, and the acronym is OCR, because this is the process that we make all of these archives searchable. So you can search for a word, and it will bring back exactly the right place in the text for you. The way that we do this is via OCR. OCR stands for Optical Character Recognition. And you don't need to know too much about it, more about it now. I will explain more to the successful applicants, or, you know, contact me afterwards and I'll happily give you a lecture all about it. But OCR is an algorithmic, it's a software process. And basically it's a computer, or it's using a piece of software to read, in quote unquote, what is on that digitized image, that first digitized image. Okay, so essentially it's creating a machine readable version of the original image. It isn't perfect. Okay, Gale is about as good at doing this as anybody on the planet. At the kind of scale that we work at, nobody does it better than Gale. Okay, but we are not perfect, and that is something very much to bear in mind when you're searching for things. Okay, but nevertheless, what you have is the ability in the Gale archives to download these first two images. Okay, so the first is the original document, and the second is a machine readable version of that document, so a text version of that document. And this gets very interesting because, of course, when you've got the text on your desktop, you can then take it and you can plug it into freely available open software, which is what I've done. I've used a piece of software called Voyant, and Voyant basically allows me to do statistical analysis like this one, very simple, basically just counting the most commonly occurring words or phrases from within my document. And we can see these here. And then if I want to, I can visualize that. So I can turn it into a word cloud, very basic again. But this is really interesting because this allows me to tell you that this original document is about birth control and children's health and mothers and families and medicine. Okay, so you need never have read the original document. You need never even have seen the original document. And now you've got a vague sense of what it's about. Okay, and now obviously this is very, very basic stuff, but this is your basic text mining workflow. Okay, from primary source all the way through to visualization. And this and many, many other techniques is what I'll be showing you when we get into looking at what you've got available as part of the fellowship through the Gale tools. Okay, one of the things I'm sure you're all really, really keen to learn is what archives are included as part of your access through the fellowships. And the answer is basically all of them. Okay, I thought I'd pull out some really relevant ones for you, but as you'll have seen, I hope, from the advert that we put out last week, we've opened up access to all the Gale archives and to Gale Digital Scholar Lab. Okay, so what I'm hoping that you'll do is, if you really want, if you're enthused after this session and you want to apply for the fellowship, I hope you'll spend a little bit of time in the archives, just at a very, very high level, figuring out which ones might be useful to your research, which ones are likely to have material that's relevant for you, so that you can kind of just mention that as part of your application, so that we've kind of got a sense that there is some stuff that's going to be useful to you. Because although the Gale archives are great and they are massive, and they really are massive, you know, 250 million pages is a lot, believe me, when it comes to primary source documents, they're not comprehensive. And I don't want you to get the idea that they are. Okay, we have a load of stuff, but we don't have everything. Okay, now that might not be an issue, and you'll come. I'll talk about that in a bit. But really, we're hoping that your research will make use of some Gale archives, so that we can talk about your use of them, and we can show what you found, how you found it, and how useful you found it. Okay, so do have an explore and sort of figure out, are these things that are going to be useful to me? And if they're not, that's totally fine. Okay, no problems at all, but good to let us know. I thought I'd just pull out some that I think are going to be useful. I don't know if people have heard of Chatham House. Chatham House is one of the world's leading think tanks on international relations. It's been around since the sort of 1910s, I believe. Essentially, it's a place where world leaders and other sort of notable dignitaries and that sort of thing can go and speak and learn from each other and have meetings in private. It's given birth to a thing that they call the Chatham House Rule, which, if anyone's ever had a meeting under Chatham House rules, means that the people speaking in the meeting will be anonymized. Okay, it's so that world leaders can come at times of war or conflict and speak openly, even if they're talking about things that might be in contravention of their government policies at the time. Obviously, archives like the Decolonization Archive here, the Refugees Relief and Resettlement Archive, obviously really, really useful to this group. But one I thought, and I don't know why it's blurry, but there it is on the left, one I thought is going to be incredibly useful, and it's the reason why I've come to IASFM this year to offer fellowships, is the Global Development and Humanitarian Aid, specifically the papers of the International Federation of the Red Cross and the Red Crescent. Okay, so this is a new series for us, but the Red Cross papers in their cover, I think 1919 up to 1997. So you've got in there the papers of the International Federation of the Red Cross and the Red Crescent, which I'm hoping for some, maybe many, hopefully all of you will be really, really, really useful and relevant for your research. Now, I said we'd opened up access to these archives. This is how you get access. I've done a little QR code there. That's the link. It's IASFM Fellows after tiny URL, and the password is IASFM. One thing that I want to point you towards when you go into that link, because sometimes it can be difficult to know where you're going and what you're doing. I want you to point you towards a thing called Gale Primary Sources, which is essentially a cross search that searches across all or nearly all of the Gale archives, and it can be incredibly useful to you. So useful, in fact, that I'm going to show it to you now. Okay, so when you go through that link, you'll be taken to this page. And this page just has all of the various archives that we have in there. Some are going to be completely useless to you. In fact, actually, this is my access. So this looks slightly different to your access. So there'll be slightly fewer non-useful things in here. So yeah, things that you don't need to worry about. I've just kept it to just archives and things that will be useful to you. So, for example, if you're interested in what was it, the global, there it is, Global Development Humanitarian Aid, you can click on that and you can go exploring that archive, the archive of the Red Cross. You can see the collections that are in it, and you can literally go browsing, you can search and all that sort of thing. Really, really useful. We put in a lot of work to, for example, and I've gone up here to the question mark and shown you what it's about, to explain what is in this archive and really contextualize it for you. But don't worry too much about that. I'm not expecting you to go in depth. Obviously, you can. Feel free to geek out. Spend as much time in these things as you like. It is open for, I think, the next month, or at least until the deadline for submissions to this fellowship. But going back to this page, what I really wanted to show you is if you go over to the cross search and click there, then you're going to see Gale Primary Sources there. And I've already clicked on it, and it takes me to this page. This is Gale Primary Sources. And this, honestly, is, I think, one of the best ways, or one of the best places you can go. First of all, because it's got everything that we have in there. So if I scroll down, you can see all the various different things there. There's Decolonization archive there. Chatham House, there's Chatham House. And as we go somewhere in the G's, yeah, there's Global Development and Humanitarian Aid. So you're searching across all of it in one go. So it's a real time saver. Okay, not searching through everything individually, but everything all in one go. So 64 various archives, and many of these are multi-part archives as well. And you can just do a basic search. I thought, something that many of you might be looking for, some of you might be interested in, is doing something like this. And bear in mind that when, and if you guys are successful, I'm going to be showing you all the tips and tricks and best ways to efficiently search through this and make the discoveries that are going to make your research absolutely sing. Okay, that's one of the things I'm passionate about, but I will definitely be showing you how to get the best out of these things. But if you want to, for the moment, just while you're kind of dipping your toe into the water, if you search for something like Iraq and refugee here, and I'm just going to click search, you're going to get a lot of documents. Okay, that is totally fine. You can see at the top, 2,000 monographs, 10,000 manuscripts, 20,000 newspapers, a lot of stuff. Okay, and you can explore them in there. But what I want to show you, and really this is all I need you to do when you're thinking about which archives are going to be useful to my research and, can I put that into my application? Well, this is all I need you to do. Over on these filters, you've got various ways you can filter by language, by publication date, who the author is. The one I want to show you is databases, because this I see as a researcher as my shopping list. Okay, these are all the various different databases and archives from which my results come. So at the top, I'm getting a lot of newspapers. Okay, this is completely expected. Newspapers write a lot. They write all the time, a lot of publishing going on there. So a lot of newspapers up there. But if I start scrolling down, I start seeing some interesting things. Chatham House, there we go there, fantastic. Political extremism, radicalism, okay, brilliant. Refugees, 1,000 documents in the Refugees Resettlement and Relief. US declassified documents, CIA documents, White House documents, load of interesting things in there. But then you start seeing some things you maybe weren't expecting. So archives of sexuality and gender. Now, unsurprisingly, I would expect to see things in there very much on a kind of intersectionality tip, but they may be useless to you, or they may be really useful. So you can definitely go and look in there. Papers from British intelligence are in there, even papers from the 18th century. But, here we can see, here's China and here's global development and humanitarian aid, which is where we find our Red Cross. And of course, if I select that and just click apply, then it's going to narrow it all the way down to now 200 and whatever that was, 82 documents here. So various different newspapers and manuscripts, and I can literally go and sort of read those. Now, again, these might be useless to you. They might, only have Iraq and refugee in passing, or they could be perfect. I'm fully expecting you to, as diligent researchers, to get in here and to start going down rabbit holes. This is the joy, but also the curse of having these massive things. But in here, this gives you the ability, and it gives you the ability, to narrow down if you want to. So I can search within just the documents that I've got. So, let's say I might be looking for, war or conflict or something like that. I have no idea if this is going to appear within here. But if I search, okay, that's good. It narrows it down to a more manageable 150. And I can keep doing that as much as I want. But really, this is all you need to do when you're applying for this fellowship. As well as talking about your research, just give us an idea of what you're interested in and which archives you're thinking might have relevant documents. You don't have to tell me what the documents are or anything like that. I don't want you to do the research now. I just want you to get a sense in your own mind of which archives are going to be useful to me. Let us know, and then when you're successful, I'll show you how to find what you want, how to make sure you don't miss out on anything, and hopefully build with you amazing research projects. So that's all I really wanted to show you about using Gale primary sources and kind of getting the most out of it. In my last sort of little bit here, whoops, hello, don't know why that's decided to move off, but that's okay. Yeah, here we go. In my last little bit, I just want to talk to you about the sort of digital humanities aspect of it, specifically a product, like I said, I've been working on since the start when we developed it about 7 years ago, Gale Digital Scholar Lab. And this is Gale's text mining platform. And I'm just introducing it to you so you've got a sense of what it is, and it might, start to pique your interest. This is what the lab looks like. It looks very much like Gale Primary Sources. It works the same way. the look and feel is the same. And what it is an online cloud-hosted text and data mining research environment through which you can access any of the institution's Gale primary source collections. So any of the Gale primary source collections that we have will be available to you through the fellowship and the lab as well. So here they are all here. You can also upload your own data. So if you get to a point where you're thinking, well, I found some Gale archives, but I've also got my own collection, or I've got data from somewhere else. If you can express it as text, you can upload it into the lab, that's fine. And you can mix it with Gale data if you want to, or you can run it separately through the lab pipeline, and you can analyze it in there if you want to, no problem at all. So you can build a kind of mixed project featuring Gale archives and your own data, whatever that might be. You can compare and contrast, or you can have a kind of merged content set. All of that is fine. And basically, the way that the lab works is you create your own custom content sets. And what I mean by that is you're basically bringing together buckets of content, sets of content, and it can be anything. So it all works together. So you can bring together a 17th century journal, an 18th century book, a 19th century newspaper, and a 20th century playbill. Okay, you can do all of that stuff and you can analyze it. You can do that in 5 minutes. I don't know why you ever would, but you can do it if you need to. I've just seen a question in the chat, so I'm just quickly going to have a look at that one. Oh, wow, fantastic. Oh, there we go. So Veronica's putting some really, really good context in there. So I'll point you at the chat as well. Obviously, you can organize and manage your research. All that is very, very useful, believe me, when it comes to doing this kind of research. And then when you've got your data sets, you can apply 6 powerful open source text mining tools to it. I'm not going to spend time explaining what these things are, but suffice to say that all of these tools are built on open source tools. So you can go to these tools on the open web if you want to. But if you were to do that, you need to know how to code to make these tools work. Now, the lab is a no-code environment. If you are not a coder, or if you are not technically minded at all, you might start kind of feeling, right now, you might be thinking, oh God, is this for me? I promise you it is, okay? We have had fellows, I have worked with academics who describe themselves as technical novices, and often using kind of stronger language than that, okay? So people who, struggle to do spreadsheets and things like this, okay? So genuinely, don't let that be an impediment to you putting yourself forward for these fellowships, okay? So the lab is a no-code environment. And what that means is that you can configure with no coding experience. So this is how you can configure a tool to make it do what you want it to do. And that's a big part of doing this, right? Configuring these tools to make them work for you, and not just how the default setting is. This is as complex as it gets. Okay, this is the hardest configuration in the lab. Give it a name, put 3 numbers into 3 boxes, and then add a cleaning configuration. Okay, simple. Then click the green button and you will get an analysis. I can't promise it will be a good analysis, although once I'm finished with you, it will be a great analysis. Okay, and I will help you to understand what it is and help you to understand how to use that to really take your research forward. Our hope is that by using this, you're able to make discoveries that would be impossible through traditional research methods, okay? And really find things out about your subject that help your research in years to come, okay? And I can say this because I'm in touch with most of our ex-fellows, and this is what they're doing. We're seeing book chapters, we're seeing conference presentations, we're seeing journal articles, all built on the work that they did during their fellowship. And, in some cases by learning completely new techniques. That is my role as unpaid research assistant. Okay, it's about helping you really make the most of this and get what you need to out of it. And this is the kind of analysis that you can get. Okay, this is a rich interactive visualization that allows you to explore your topics in more depth. Okay, now what we're looking at here, this is 2,000 editorials from the Times newspaper that talk about women's suffrage. Okay, and this is a clustering tool that basically groups them into clusters depending on the characteristics of the document, not on the content. So don't worry about it too much. The only thing you need to know about this is that if you need to, you can download this visualization and you can use it as in your project, you know, as a justification for one of your points. Okay, this, you know, I'll explain to you how you can use this and how you can interpret this to really make sense of it. But you can also use it to further your research. Okay, because each of these colored nodes, each of these little colored symbols are a link, and if you click that link, it will take you through to the document itself. So we can go from what we're looking at here, which is 2,000 documents, you know, a really distant view. We can go all the way down to a close reading, so an individual document, incredibly quickly. And that's the value of the lab to you, okay? Because it's an integrated environment where you have both the tools on one hand and the content on the other. And you can go between one view and the other incredibly quickly to make discoveries in ways that would be impossible, because you're just not going to read 2,000 documents, right? You know, but being able to look at them this way allows you to make discoveries that would be impossible through other means. So yeah, you can create bespoke projects. You know, this is a project in the lab that I did about Gothic poetry, which I had a lot of fun with, teaching a class at Newcastle University on Gothic poetry and identifying poems. You can export data for use outside the lab. So if you are a coder or if you're used to using other tools, you can take data out the lab and you can put it into other tools. That's totally fine. And I'll show you how you can do that. And we do a lot of work on kind of contextualizing the tools and the techniques and the methodologies. There's a lot of integrated help and instruction materials within there. Now, obviously you'll have me and you'll have access to all the lab experts to be able to help you throughout the fellowships. But if you need to, there is a lot of self-directed learning you can do in the Learning Center. And in there, we do a lot of things around curriculum materials as well. So there's a lot of things like sample projects. In fact, we've just released a course in here on teaching. So an introduction to DH course. Now, the reason that I mention this is because the fellowships are open to people not just who want to use the lab and use the archives for their own research, but you can also put forward a teaching project. Like, we've had brilliant projects and brilliant fellows, in fact one this year, who his output from the fellowship was a teaching toolkit, a pedagogy toolkit on teaching environmental history with digital humanities in the classroom. Okay, now if that sounds interesting to you, that would be amazing. Okay, you can talk about, you know, interpreting and adapting the existing DH course, Intro to DH course, for your own subject. You can talk about teaching, you know, the history of forced migration, whatever it is that you're interested in. You know, that is absolutely worth considering when you put forward your application. You know, it doesn't have to be a research project that we're talking about here. It can be using your time to develop, you know, teaching materials or something like that. And I would be very interested in talking to anyone who deals with that. But for most people, anyone doing a research project, you have the ability to create a research project. And remember, I said, we're not talking about a PhD thesis here. We're talking about, you know, a methodology in the lab that you can chronicle using the inbuilt notebook and then build into a project. Okay, so you can build projects in the lab that bring together all your research and your methodological notes into very sort of very easily and quickly compilable project. Something that looks a little bit like this. And this is something that I've compiled here. Nice and easy to structure it and to bring in all the various components that you've used. And then basically, you can export that project. And within the lab, we offer a free review process. So you can get expert peer review if you publish your paper through the lab. So you can submit, I should say, your paper through the lab for review. And then if you would like to, and this is something that all of our fellows this year, most of our fellows this year are doing, have your work published for free on the Open Gale Research Showcase. So this is a showcase of early career researcher written work that projects that they've done using Gale Digital Scholar Lab, really designed to be something that other people can learn from. Okay, because like I said, what we're about is trying to kind of capture your research, capture your methodology, not capture it in the sense that we own it. You know, we don't own any of this stuff. It's open research. Okay, we publish this on a Creative Commons open license. It's not exclusive, and if you want it taken down, absolutely have it taken down. That's no problem. Really, what we're doing, we're publishing this stuff, one, for your exposure, so that you can talk about being published on here, but two, so that other people can come in and learn from what you've done. Learn from your methodology, whether you've made mistakes, and sometimes that's the really interesting stuff, where you failed, as well as where you've succeeded. Okay, and that is what we're hoping will be one of the outcomes of all of your fellowships, is a project developed in the lab and published on Gale Research Showcase. So that's kind of the time that I had to be talking about, but I thought I would sum up. Okay, so first of all, there is absolutely no need for you to be a DH expert. If what I've been explaining to you is the first time you've ever thought about this stuff, that is fine. You are absolutely eligible for this fellowship. Okay, fellowships can support research or teaching, whatever you're kind of passionate about, whatever you think will make a difference and will be really interesting to other people, then put that forward. Okay, so absolutely this can be about your research and doing a bit of your research or moving your research forward, and that's what we're hoping we can do and we can help you with. But also it can be about moving your teaching forward and, you know, thinking about pedagogical research. Okay, that is absolutely as applicable. I talked about kind of speaking opportunities and, of course, publication opportunities through Gale Research Showcase. But in terms of speaking opportunities, as I talked about, you know, we give that funding to go to the IASFM annual meeting. But hopefully, what you'll do is you'll stay in touch with us, and we'll maintain the relationship beyond the length of the fellowship, as I do with, you know, literally dozens of other fellows from all sorts of different associations. And what we've been able to do is find ways of working together, whether that's delivering joint conference papers or promoting your work or future work that you're going to do, or book chapters or whatever it might be. But, you know, where we can find an opportunity for you to talk about your research, hopefully your research using Gale, you know, how you found it, what was useful, what wasn't useful, and how you did it. You know, because we found that it's much, much more accessible, it's much more relevant having you talk about the work that you've done rather than me talking about it. Okay, I would, you know, I'd much rather that we gave the megaphone and we gave the opportunity to you all rather than us doing it. And then, as I said, the reports that we do at the end, they highlight the methodology that you've used and the archives that you've used. Another thing that we do, so one thing that we do at the end is we do a sort of short questionnaire, just to sort of, you know, 2 pages, just to talk about, you know, how you found it, what you did, what was useful, what wasn't useful. And then we do a sort of short exit interview. And from that and your research, we build up a case study. And those case studies are things that you'll find on the fellowships page that I'll share with you. And really, that's just about talking about your experience of the fellowship and your research. And it's something that we share around the world to hopefully get you as much visibility and career support as we possibly can. So I think that is more than enough of me talking. So now I would like to throw it over to you. Okay, so I would now like to ask for questions. You know, if you don't want to unmute, that's totally fine. Pop your questions in the chat. Otherwise, there's only a few of us here. If you want to unmute and ask me, that'd be great. We'll put your hand up and I'll call on you. That's fine. Before I do, very quickly, I'm also going to put this page up so that it's on the screen and you've got time to digest it and indeed take pictures of it or follow the QR codes or whatever. These are the links that I was talking about, links to the Gale Fellowships page, links to information about one of the archives that I think will be of particular use, Gale Development, Global Development and Humanitarian Aid, a link to the sort of wider Gale Primary Sources Archive, so you can kind of get some sense of what there is in there, a link to Gale Digital Scholar Lab and information about that, and of course the all-important application page there at the bottom. But enough of me. What questions we have? I see a couple of questions already. So I am going to look at this. Right, we have 3 questions here from Megan. Thank you, Megan, for that. I have a question about Boolean operators and querying the archives. What level of complexity in terms of search syntaxes does, I never know what the plural of syntaxes is, by the way, but I think you might have got it there. Syntaxes does Gale support? That is so interesting. So yes, Gale does use Boolean operators, and I don't want to go too deep into it because I'm slightly worried that I'm going to like put everybody to sleep if I do. Gale Boolean operators, for what it's worth, are like those ands and ors and nots and things like that. And the simple answer is, Megan, you can do quite a lot with those. It's not terrifically complicated, but it's and or not, within, near to, that sort of thing. So you can be really targeted and surgical with the searching that you do. And you will all have full training on how to do that. And in fact, there is help guides within the archives. If you're interested, you can see those. The advanced search has all of those in there, and you can use them. Also, things like truncators, asterisks to find you any alternative ending to a word. So, for example, let me think of a good word. So, I mean, in research that I often do, suffrage. Sometimes I'm looking for suffrage, suffragette, suffragism, suffragist. I can do all of that by typing in SUFFRAG and then doing an asterisk, and it will find me any alternative ending to the word stem that I've typed in. So that kind of level of complexity, but of course there is the ability to just sort of type in words with and in between, or type in phrases if you need to. Are teaching or research projects viewed more favorably? The simple answer is neither, I would say. But just in terms of, that allows me to talk about the sort of judging of this. Gale stays hands off with the judging of the applications. Okay, we don't really want to get involved. We would like to leave it to the scholarly association, mainly because you're the ones with the expertise on the projects, and you don't need us coming in there and kind of gumming up the works. Okay, so I gather there'll be a judging panel. I am more than happy to and I will probably be sending them just some of our thoughts, just if that would be useful. But really, it's over to the judging panel about what it is that they're looking for. Megan, to answer your question, I don't think teaching or research projects will be viewed more favorably than the other. There is definitely room for either, and as long as you make the case well and about how you're using it, I hope that the panel will look at them equally as favorably. That would be certainly from our end what we'd be looking for. Could we submit a teaching and a research project, or only one per applicant? That's a really great question. I'm happy, frankly. I mean, at this point, I'm going to look at Veronica and the association and make sure that I'm not going beyond my bounds here. But I would say, if you want to submit 2 applications, one for a teaching and one for a research project, be my guest. Okay, that would be totally fine. It makes total sense. And then, of course, you're giving yourself the choice there of either or. And I'm sure you wouldn't be given 2 fellowships to do both. So Veronica said, fine with us too. So yeah, let's say go ahead with either of those. It's a beautiful question, and thank you, Megan, for all of those. So Manya, I hope that answers your question as well. So those are all the questions I have in the chat. Are there any other questions from anybody else here? I'm just looking. I can't see that anyone's raising their hand. Obviously, please feel free to unmute. It's a safe space. Do ask me any questions that you've got. And if anything's not clear about the kind of organization of this or the timing, anything I haven't made clear, then do please ask those questions. But anything else at all? Some of you might, frantically be typing in the chat right now as we speak. No? I don't see anyone unmuting. So Megan, I have a feeling that you've maybe covered everyone's questions there, for which you have my eternal gratitude. That's fantastic. Thank you very much. Michelle, Veronica, my colleagues from IASFM. For me, I don't know if nobody else has got any questions, then I don't want to keep people here needlessly. They can go and enjoy their mornings on what I hope is a sunny day. But do you have any questions? Veronica, Michelle, any questions for me? Anything I haven't covered? How are we feeling so far?
Oh, absolutely. I'm ecstatic. Like I said, it's not, I've probably done some Gale database when I was doing my PhD, but not consciously. I've seen it, but like I know of Westlaw, coming from law, that's one of our
Yeah.
biggest, Um, then some of the other database in public health, I can, tip them up my finger. But now I'm kind of like going back, why didn't I know of Gale like consciously? Why didn't I, when I was at Oxford, we had a conversation during our training. I mean, most of Oxford resources wasn't beyond or
Mm-hmm.
before 15th century, and same story with the context of my topic I'm dealing on. Same story, like the library didn't necessarily recommend Gale to go to Gale. Everybody told me to go to Kew Gardens down in London, and I was
Oh, you went down to the National Library, National Archive. It's pretty
exactly.
beautiful. It's worth a trip, that's for sure.
Exactly. So I was very excited to have that my first introduction, and I'm going to certainly do more and make use of this, as you put it, your free research assistant. I'm just so grateful. I don't know any other database that is out there doing this kind of major support for academics and researcher. You go to your library, but to have the direct first-hand contact where people from Gale, and it was three of you from Gale that actually met with my research team. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And so I just really want to encourage ISFM members to take opportunity, especially our early career and PhD and graduate students. Please make sure you take this opportunity to get the best out of it. My main question is around those from the global south that are
Yes.
limited with access to internet and
Mm-hmm.
resources. How do you work around that?
I mean, it's tough. There really is no getting around the fact that, these things are internet based and available that way. I mean, I'm pleased to say that, there is a sort of burgeoning archive. Well, all I can really talk about is, the access and the institutions that are buying Gale archives and that sort of thing. And I'm really pleased to say that we're seeing real growth in places like Latin America, Central America as well. India, especially, seems to be on there's a real upward trajectory, and we're a real success story. Actually, last year I've been doing some work with the University of Delhi, but with quite a few other institutions as well, and also institutions within Africa as well. I mean, we've had for quite a while institutions in South Africa, but we're starting to see places in North Africa, slightly less sub-Saharan Africa, although I have done a little bit of work with universities in Nigeria as well. I mean, for what it's worth, I mean, one of the things I love about Digital Humanities is that it is a really global endeavor, and it's a global community, and they work hard to be as inclusive as possible to scholars from the global south. I mean, 3 years ago, the big global DH conference was in the Netherlands, and we actually sponsored, I think, 5 scholars to come from Africa to come up and present and to attend that. So they're really working on it. But as you say, there are technological hurdles that it's difficult to sort of find one's way around. But as these things improve, so access to these kinds of materials improves. I mean, from the other end, what I can say also, just in terms of our digitization strategy, which maybe 25 years ago was very Anglo-centric, or, you know, centered on the Anglosphere, you know, where our partners, our archive partners were the British Library or the US National Archives or the UK National Archives, or, you know, in Australia or whatever it might be. There are far, far more. So I would say over the last 10 years, you're seeing far more archives from outside of that sphere. You know, whether that is in, you know, we do quite a lot with China and archives from Asia. We have a few, not many, but a few African archival partners, definitely partners in Latin America. But, you know, as we're seeing, you know, the Red Cross, for example, is, I want to say the archive is in Switzerland, but I could be wrong. It's new and I'm still learning it. But it's definitely in kind of mainland Europe. So we're starting to see the content within there coming from outside the Anglosphere, which I think is a hugely positive thing. Yeah.
Can I ask another
Yeah,
question?
please.
Okay, thanks, Chris, for that detailed background information. I'm quite impressed, you know, because I mean, we all know about the issue around knowledge production, and when it comes to migration and refugee, there is that tipping point where, or that reverse order where those from the global south with literally limited lived experience of being refugees or migrants in the broad sense of the word, or I should say recent migrant, because everybody's a migrant,
Yeah.
tend to have control and authority over the knowledge that is being produced about the people that are living the experience. So I'm pleased to hear that you're moving beyond the Anglophone or the anglicized version of Gale. To that point, I want to ask whether there are any other languages that Gale is engaging with.
Yeah.
And second, if there is an opportunity to introduce any form of AI, or there is a connection with AI in this sense for translation and helping with resources for those who their first language isn't English.
Yeah, that's a really great question. Two great questions. Okay, so the Gale archives are about 90% English, but, you know, 10% is 25 million pages. So there's a lot in there from lots of different languages. We were the first people to make a sort of full text searchable archive of early Arabic material. We've got early Arabic books from the British Library. So we have kind of, you know, plenty of material in non-English languages. In terms of AI, interestingly, we're doing a lot of work at the moment on AI translation of archives, and, you know, the ability to both search within archives, so sort of translating the interface, but also translating kind of on the fly what happens when you you know what you get. So you know, allowing people to search in their own languages, but bring back content in that maybe say in English or in French or whatever it might be. So that stuff is in the works. It's not available in the lab yet. Sorry, it's not available in the lab or in Gale Primary Sources yet, but I think it will be this year. So I'm hoping within the term of the fellowships, we should see sort of something with that. And if there are interests in that, or if there are people who would value that kind of functionality, then I would again encourage them to apply, because though, you know, we're always looking for those experiences so that we can build platforms and content that speaks to and works for those experiences. So in terms of, like, you know, just plugging things into chatbots or into LLMs or things like that, we have issues with kind of copyright and the IP, and that's because of training the models. You know, the you know, ChatGPT or whatever won't say we're not going to train the model. And the Times, basically, it's kind of not really our problem. It's more the problem of the people who own the IP of this document, which is the Times newspaper or the British Library. Understandably, they have a bit of a problem with those kind of things. But again, these are live questions, and I work with DH researchers who are interested in AI and using kind of chatbots and using AI to correct OCR and all this kind of stuff. So there's some really interesting stuff. And again, I could take a whole hour to talk about it, but I won't. But suffice to say, we have to kind of balance the needs and the legal needs of our archive partners and the kind of research needs of our researchers. But we're trying and generally speaking succeeding to be able to support those things. And yeah, and again, I'm the guy to talk to, often the guy to talk to about that. So happy to have a conversation with anyone who's interested in it.
Thank you, Chris.
That's all right.
There'll be some more questions for you. Anyone out there with thoughts and comments and questions?
Well, if people are feeling too shy, or maybe we've just answered everything and this has been very, very efficient, which is unlikely, but let's hope. My email is now in the chat. Please feel free to drop me an email at any time, ask me any questions, anything that occurs to you once all of this is done. Yeah.
And Michelle, can you please add, sorry, Chris, can you please add the link to the applications so that way people that are watching can just, actively click the link and go and put in the applications.
Yeah, just give me a minute.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Michelle. And thank you for inviting me. Veronica, thank you for setting this up. Thank you for being such a great host, especially on what I gather is a national holiday for some of you. So I hope I hope it's been a good way of spending your day off. I'm sure it hasn't, but just tell me it has.
This is a more meaningful way for me, honestly. I mean, apart from being my family, this is definitely productive.
Oh, good. I'm
very
very glad.
Yes.
I'm very excited to be working together with the association. So delighted we've been able to do it. So thank you to everyone for coming.
Yes, and if you'd like to revisit the content, as I said in the chat earlier, we will be uploading this recording to the ISFM YouTube channel. We'll send out a notification when that has happened. Okay, so
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Iman.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Everybody.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Shamna, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.